Egypt takes the stage, and perhaps the fate of Gaza is on the table. There, key figures like Macron, Trump, and the enigmatic Peshkan, representing Iran's leadership, are expected to decide crucial paths. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu faces protests both inside and outside Israel, as European nations join global demonstrations against the country. If a ceasefire is truly established, the Houthis promise to bring peace as well, leaving Israel under intense international scrutiny. Elsewhere, Madagascar sinks deeper into crisis, opening the door for yet another coup on the African continent. In South Asia, Afghanistan and Pakistan stand on the brink, a possible proxy war unfolding across territories vital to American interests. China, on the other hand, lashes out at the United States, calling Trump a hypocrite and claiming it fears no American power. Meanwhile, the ISW reports that Moscow has entered the zero phase of war against NATO, while the Financial Times asserts that the US is effectively at war with Russia. As we mentioned in the introduction, Egypt is set to host, in the coming week, what could be the most significant summit on the Palestinian issue in recent years, perhaps comparable, some say, to the Oslo Accords. That might sound like an exaggeration, but there are reasons for such expectations. A ceasefire is being arranged. Hamas has promised to release the hostages, possibly by Monday or Tuesday at the latest. Israel, for its part, has announced a ceasefire as well, launching strikes against Lebanon but halting attacks on the Gaza Strip. It also plans to withdraw a large portion of its forces, reducing its occupation from roughly 75% to about 60% of the territory, with expectations of a gradual pullback. However, as always, the key points of disagreement remain. Hamas leaders have made it clear that disarmament is not on the table. Meanwhile, Netanyahu and Trump's proposal centers on the demilitarization of Gaza, offering Hamas amnesty if it abandons armed resistance and its ambitions to control the region. Netanyahu has been blunt: Hamas will be disarmed, peacefully or by force. Another critical issue involves Gaza's underground tunnel network, a crucial infrastructure for Hamas's military operations. Israel insists that destroying these tunnels is essential, which would require a military presence, either Israeli or foreign, to dismantle the entire subterranean system. But would Hamas ever agree to that? These questions will dominate the upcoming Cairo summit, which has already confirmed the attendance of Macron, Trump, and Iran's president, Peshkan. Each actor arrives with starkly different views. Iran, Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt all approach the Palestinian question with conflicting agendas. The summit is expected to decide how Gaza will be governed, who the technocrats will be, how long the transitional administration will last, and how the Peace Council, led by Trump and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, will function. Further uncertainties linger. Will the reformed Palestinian Authority eventually control the territory? Who will select and command the new Arab coalition forces trained under U.S. supervision? How will groups like Islamic Jihad and Hamas fit into this new structure? While it's a promising development, there are caveats. Netanyahu himself faces serious corruption scandals and has long been criticized for aligning with ultranationalist and religious factions that challenge Israel's secular foundations. His judicial reform agenda, which sparked mass protests earlier this year, was paused during the war. Now, with peace negotiations advancing, those protests are returning. Demonstrations erupted again at Tel Aviv's Rabin Square and even during an international football match between Norway and Israel, where Norwegian fans waved Palestinian flags and booed Netanyahu's leadership. For Israel to rebuild its image with Western allies and regain trust within the international community, Netanyahu's political downfall might, paradoxically, become a necessary step. Whether he will allow that to happen remains one of the biggest questions ahead. Furthermore, the Houthis, a Shiite rebel group based in Yemen, have announced that if the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas succeeds, they too are prepared to abandon armed resistance. It's worth remembering that the Houthis have significantly disrupted international trade routes in the region around the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the Gulf of Aden, and the Red Sea, targeting vessels suspected of having connections to Israel. In a sense, not in a positive way, but undeniably bold, the Houthis challenged Operation Prosperity Guardian, AU.S, and UK-led naval mission. They attacked some of the world's most critical commercial ships, even launching missiles, though without much success, against Israel. For a group that doesn't even fully control Yemen and is mired in a civil war, such actions were striking. Therefore, the end of Houthi attacks marks a significant and welcome development for Israel. In addition, we've seen a wave of Generation Z-led protests spreading across multiple countries, marked by powerful and symbolic imagery, notably the one-piece Jolly Roger flag, which has become a global emblem of resistance against corrupt and authoritarian governments. Social media platforms like Discord and China's popular short video app, You Know the One, have become digital hubs for this new generation, people between 16 and 30 years old, who are expressing deep frustration over governments that spend heavily on bureaucracy while offering little in return, especially for young citizens struggling to find jobs or achieve financial independence. It's a common sentiment. Many young people look at their parents or grandparents and wonder how previous generations could afford homes and cars with far less income. Now, despite working hard, they can barely cover rent. And if that's the case in an emerging economy like Brazil, imagine how much worse it is in poorer nations. One striking example is Madagascar, a former French colony that gained independence in the 1960s but has never achieved lasting political stability. President Andry Rajoelina, in power since 2018 and re-elected in 2023 amid allegations of fraud and opposition boycotts, now faces mass unrest. Recent cuts to electricity and water supply became the spark that ignited widespread protests over corruption, inequality, and public mismanagement. Earlier today, a military faction opposing the government announced it had taken control of the armed forces and joined the civilian demonstrators. With the army turning against the president and public anger rising, Madagascar now stands on the brink of another revolution, a movement once again driven by Generation Z, demanding change in a system they see as broken. Moreover, there's growing concern about a potential conflict brewing in Central Asia, specifically along the tense border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, two nations that share roughly 2,600 kilometers of frontier. This week, Pakistan carried out airstrikes inside Afghan territory, not directly against the Taliban government, but targeting a militant group known as the TTP, Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, essentially a Pakistani offshoot of the Taliban. Islamabad does not recognize the TTP as legitimate, viewing it as an extremist organization seeking to impose a strict Islamist regime, and has long accused Afghanistan's Taliban government of harboring TTP militants who plan and launch attacks from Afghan soil. In response, the Afghan government condemned the strikes as a violation of sovereignty, accusing Pakistan of acting on behalf of foreign interests eager to provoke intervention in the region. Soon after, Kabul retaliated with its own attacks, claiming to have killed 58 Pakistani soldiers, while noting it halted further strikes at the request of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, both worried about escalating violence. Pakistan then sealed its border and announced that it had eliminated over 200 militants from the Taliban and allied factions operating in Afghanistan with the Taliban's tacit approval. This is a complex and dangerous conflict. Afghanistan, while not rich in resources aside from its opium trade, holds immense strategic importance. It sits at the heart of Central Asia, a region laden with natural gas reserves and surrounded by competing powers. Russia has recognized the Taliban government to advance its own regional interests. China is equally invested, both through its Belt and Road Initiative, which envisions infrastructure passing through Afghanistan, and through close ties with Pakistan, a key Chinese ally. Meanwhile, the United States retains interest in the region as well. The Bagram Air Base, originally built by the Soviets and later used by the U.S. during the 2001 invasion, remains a valuable military and intelligence asset. Reports suggest that Donald Trump has even explored negotiations with the Taliban to regain limited access to the base, officially for U.S. security interests, though its proximity to Chinese nuclear and research sites makes its strategic purpose clear. In short, what appears to be a localized border conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan could easily evolve into a proxy confrontation involving major global powers, the United States, Russia, and China, each seeking to shape the future of this volatile crossroads of Asia. And speaking of China, things are heating up again, and this time, it's serious. The world seems to be on the brink of a new trade war. It's been about 6 months since Trump's so-called Liberation Day, when he announced sweeping tariffs on almost every major economy. Now, China has hit back, announcing new export restrictions on rare earth minerals to the United States and several Western nations. Beijing communicated the decision formally, insisting it's a matter of principle and national sovereignty, claiming it cannot be sure how these critical resources are being used abroad. The timing is telling. Just yesterday, 2 vessels collided in the South China Sea, an area both China and the Philippines claim as their own. According to international law, 200 nautical miles of maritime territory belong to the Philippines, but China argues that, for historical and commercial reasons, it should control the entire sea. Here's where it gets complicated. The Philippines has a strategic military partnership with the United States. So, from Beijing's perspective, how can it sell rare earth minerals to the U.S., materials crucial for military and tech manufacturing, if there's a chance those same minerals end up in American weapons sold to the Philippines, which could be used against China? In an official statement, Beijing justified the move as a direct response to what it called unfriendly trade practices from Washington. China said, "Our actions are a reaction to the United States' commercial behavior, which has only worsened since last month's negotiations. Threatening high tariffs at any time is not the right way to deal with China. Our stance is clear, we do not seek conflict, but we are not afraid of it. If the U.S. continues acting unilaterally, we will take appropriate measures to defend our interests." Essentially, China is accusing Trump of hypocrisy, arguing that it's only doing what the U.S. has long done itself. Washington banned the export of advanced semiconductors to China, claiming national security concerns, fearing they could be used in military technologies. The U.S. has also threatened to ban or force the sale of major Chinese tech platforms over similar security claims. Now, China is flipping that argument, saying, "We're just protecting our own sovereignty, just like you." But here's where it gets even more serious. Rare earth minerals are essential to the production of everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to fighter jets and missiles. The U.S. economy, already deeply in debt, relies heavily on China's purchase of U.S. Treasury bonds. If Beijing decided to dump those bonds, it could trigger a financial shockwave across America's economy. Of course, the interdependence goes both ways. Both nations are tied through a globalized economy. Still, tensions have escalated to a point where markets are on edge. Just months ago, when Trump floated the idea of raising tariffs above 100%, panic spread across Wall Street. China's firm response back then forced Trump to step back and renegotiate. But now, with both sides doubling down again, the question is clear. Will Trump back down once more? Or are we witnessing the opening chapter of a full-scale trade war between the world's 2 biggest economies? If this deep dive into Gaza, Israel, and the complex geopolitics of the Middle East caught your attention, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on every major global development. Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to know, how do you see the future of peace in Gaza and the Middle East? Don't miss our next analysis, where we break down the latest moves by global powers and the potential shifts in international alliances. Stay informed, stay ahead.